is the Bottom Dead Center Show, presented by OSMT.
All right, we're going. We're hot. Let's go. All right, we are back. Bottom Dead Center Show here on the Old School Monster Trucks YouTube channel. Frank, we're skipping our usual Old School Monster Truck foreplay tonight, baby. We are going straight for the main course, and that main course tonight is no less one of the all-time greats of the sport himself, a man whose work and mind and just achievements have literally touched every corner and every facet of the sport, and that's none other than the man, Dan Patrick. How freaking cool is that we got Dan on the show tonight, Frank?
I mean, you can't say monster trucks without saying Dan Patrick because we've talked about it before, but you cannot go to a monster truck show current day and not see something Dan Patrick hasn't built or put his hands on. So
Yeah,
I think the passerby monster truck fans need to respect Dan Patrick because without him, I don't think this current era of monster trucks that we have would exist. That's just my opinion.
I agree. Whatever we would have now in 2026 would certainly not be what it is without Patrick's influence. And I'm not saying it would be better or worse, but I love so much of what he's done for this sport. And I mean, I think about it as I remember the day as a young fan when I learned that Dan Patrick was one of the taking nothing away from Bob Chandler and Jim Kramer and everybody else at Bigfoot that contributed to, all the trucks from 8 until, I guess up till 17 in a way. But Dan Patrick was at the nucleus of so much of that as well. And I think his side of the story maybe didn't get highlighted as much because, he ran his own truck while he worked at Foot and he left Foot when he did. And he was almost like a hired gun working there rather than like a native Bigfoot employee. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. And as you'll learn in the interview with Dan, there was a lot of gray area and that sort of thing. But I think about I've driven Bigfoot 8, I've driven 10, I've driven 11, I've driven 12 display truck, but like 14 and 15. I mean that was some of Dan's early work and some of his most notable and coolest work for the time. And I'm like, man, that is so cool that like, and I've never raced a Patrick chassis truck. I've moved one around, but I've never gotten to race one. But I've certainly driven trucks with Patrick parts on them. And much like yourself, we've both known Dan a really long time. And you've interacted with him on a deeper level than I have, especially, with some seat time you've had.
Mhm.
But I think you and I, holy cow, dude, like, if we had to build a Mount Rushmore of monster trucks tomorrow, it'd be impossible to not put Dan on there.
Well, all you have to say, Kyle, is when Bigfoot wanted to take that next step, they reached out to Dan Patrick. So
Yeah.
that's what Bob at the time Chandler, Kramer were the guys in the monster truck industry, and when they were looking to make that next step, they reached out to Dan Patrick, a truck puller from Ohio. They
Yeah.
reached out to Dan Patrick and said, "Dan, we want you to be a part of this next generation of monster trucks." So that alone at that time tells you, what Dan means to the business and what he did for the industry. Especially like I said, when Bigfoot reaches out to you and says, "Hey, we want you to be a part of moving Bigfoot forward and taking the whole industry with you," and that's basically what they did.
Yeah.
Because 8, the tourist truck, obviously, but 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the display truck, and then after that, 14, 15, that was revolutionary, and the rest of the business had to follow. But who was there? Dan Patrick.
There's a high likelihood that if you've competed in monster trucks since 1990 as a driver, there's a high likelihood if you've kicked anyone's ass, you owe at least some thanks to Dan Patrick. And if you've gotten your ass kicked, some of that was probably Dan Patrick's fault in a way, which is pretty awesome to think about. That's
Yeah.
just how wide ranging his contributions to the sport on the mechanical side certainly have been, but as a driver, obviously too. And we get into that with him too, and I mean, who wouldn't want to have the driving career that Dan Patrick's had? And how wild is it to say that his driving career is honestly not what he's best known and respected for? Lots of respect for that, but like you had that good of a driving career, and that's not even the best part of what the guy's done, which is pretty wild. And you think about second generation of the family is operating and driving in his business now, and he's still building stuff, still sending turnkey trucks out there. I mean, he helps build Bigfoot 8 in 1989, and then all these years later, now Bigfoot's bought what, two, three turnkey Patrick
Yeah.
trucks from him. So that is incredible how their circle as two different businesses and entities have had their ups and their downs and their ins and their outs, and still they've been interwoven as competitors and customers and just employees. I mean, it's I don't know. We're underselling it. You guys need to just stay tuned in because we're gonna roll right into that interview, man. And I mean, Frank, leave me with one more thought on it, but if I can steer you in a direction, just do your best to try and explain to viewers right now how unique of an experience it is to get such an open and honestly kind of funny, joyful Dan Patrick to interview with us. That was such a unique thing, I feel like.
Well, if you jump around the industry and you ask people about Dan Patrick, you get a bunch of mixed reviews. Some guys are like, oh, Dan, huh? Other guys are like, oh yeah, Dan. Other people are like, Dan, stuff's okay. But I'll tell you what,
Hmm.
my experience with Dan Patrick, and I guarantee yours, Kyle, mine's been nothing but positive, and he's
Oh
been
yeah.
nothing but nice to me, my family, and just being around him. His family, the kids and Chris and everybody are the nicest people.
Yeah.
And probably what Dan won't touch on in this interview is how much he's helped a lot of monster truck guys that were struggling at some point. He kind of lets the invoice slide. Okay, it's
Yeah.
30 days. Oh, it's 60 days. He's done a lot of that for a lot of
Yeah.
people that goes unnoticed. And there's so much Dan's done, and especially with international growth of monster trucks by selling trucks to people overseas and helping guys going over there and driving their truck for them
Hmm.
just to get their feet wet and get them going. Dan has done so much for this entire industry, and I don't care what people's opinions are on him. I know that without Dan Patrick, I don't think the trucks wouldn't be what they are now. The components, and also too his quick turnaround, which a lot of people don't know this outside the industry. He will send you some. You call him today, he'll have you something by Monday,
Yeah.
Friday. I mean, like he's quick. He's got stuff on the shelf, which a lot of these places, a lot of monster guys don't have that. And
No.
but Dan knows what he's doing. Dan's got the right people around him. He's always had good people there at his operations. So I'm telling you, Dan Patrick is a gem. And if you don't believe me, you just have to watch the interview because
Yeah.
after the interview, you will be right alongside me.
Oh yeah, he's a national treasure to monster trucks, and he is I mean, just what a brain. Sometimes I just think to myself, what a brain that guy has. I mean, that guy's forgotten more than you and I'll ever know or remember. But
Yeah, yeah.
anyways, if we haven't sold you hard enough on it, how about this? We're gonna take a super quick commercial break to pump our shitty little merch store into your guys' face and remind you can get some awful wearables and other gear at the OSMT Mart. And then we're going to roll right into the Dan Patrick interview. So, our suggestion would be go use the facilities, refill your beverage, and get that bowl of snacks topped off because you're not going to want to leave your seat once Dan Patrick starts telling his stories. So, here we go. Second half of Bottom Dead Center, the Dan Patrick episode coming right up next. All right. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Bottom Dead Center show here on the Old School Monster Trucks YouTube channel. As promised, being delivered. No introduction necessary, but we're going to do it anyways, just like we did for Jim Kramer. It is the one and only legendary Mr. Dan Patrick of Samson Monster Truck and Patrick Enterprises fame. And that's the best radio introduction I can give you there, Dano. But we're sure happy as hell to have you on the show tonight, man. How the hell are you?
Good. I've had introductions where, oh gosh, we couldn't find anybody, but we got Dan.
So do you want to know why we call the show Bottom Dead Center instead of Top Dead Center? It's because we
What's
figured
that?
we're the bottom of the hosting barrel when it comes to any
Oh.
kind of monster truck show. So we figure in the four cycle way of things with an engine, we're right before the blow part. So that's the bottom we're at right there. Well, where are you coming to us from tonight? I know I talked to you earlier today and you were on the road. What have you kind of been up to here lately?
Well, I'm finally at home, but I had to do a quick trip to the Bigfoot shop. Of course, as many people know, we have four teams over doing the Hot Wheels International Tour. And twice a year, there's a container that ships stuff over. We call it the restock container. So we sent oil and another jack and odds and ends stuff to go over, and then I had stuff to pick up from the container that come back, a couple sets of cylinder heads and other stuff like that. And some of the stuff we were a little overstocked over there on certain things. We brought the things back. So it was just a quick trip out there yesterday and switched things out this morning and headed back.
So no matter how much things have changed over the last 40 years in this business, you can still say you have to make a trip to Bigfoot once in a while, I guess.
Once in a while. And um, usually my son-in-law, Rick, Allison's husband, Rick Steffens, he does it, but they're over in England right now, and they'll be over there. They have a show in Liverpool this weekend and a show in Birmingham next weekend, and I'm going over next week. I've got a couple spare motors over there that I sent over when we sent the third and fourth truck over in December. A couple of the oil pans weren't made correctly, and so I got to switch out a few parts before they head to South America.
So your equipment in England now will get shipped all the way over to South America. Then you don't have stuff here in the States that you use for South American stuff for Europe, or how's that work?
No, we just our tours in the last 2 years over internationally have been Europe, then down to Australia and New Zealand, and some Middle Eastern stuff. Abu Dhabi and oh gosh,
Like
we've been to
Bahrain,
oh gosh, where were we last? Dubai,
Dubai.
Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and we've also been in Doha, Qatar. So this year the tour is different. So we're doing 8 shows in Europe, and then we're going to South America. Um, I know we're supposed to do some events in Japan and China and Malaysia, I believe. Um, so I mean, anything subject to change because of all that stuff kind of moves around a little bit. So we do on the average 20 international events.
That's impressive. What would you say the trucks consume the most of as far as these resupply, kits you're sending over parts wise? What are they eating up the most?
Our our trucks are kind of hard on axles because our motor program is pretty stout. We still run the Hemis and stuff, and we're maintaining 10 motors right now. And then we have, because they're all non-dirt shows and they're pretty fast-paced shows, they're pretty hard on tires. So we use all Firestone tires, and being heavier, they have a tendency to be a little harder on axles. Um, it, not it's not bad. Um, we considered it acceptable collateral damage for what we're doing. Um, I mean, our breakage is very, very small, but the problem is expensive it is to ship parts overseas and things like that. We have to take so much stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
just so much stuff. I think we have five or six spare transmissions. We have 15 or 16 spare third members. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff. Um, there's not much time to fix things, so it's just a replace, a remove and replace kind of a thing. And then, a couple times a year, I go over and service things, and Rick and our crew over there, we've got a really good group of people that's part of our team over there, and they do a phenomenal job. I just stand back and am just amazed on how well everything goes.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, it's a great point you bring up. You're basically your own supply chain over there because of the time and cost to try and fly over, parts from here over to there. I mean, they really have to have their own supply chain. If you got four trucks eating away at 12 spare third members, I mean, you could deplete that supply pretty quickly there if you're not careful.
We don't have problems with the third members. We break the lockers,
Yeah.
and so that's not a huge deal and stuff like that. But the biggest thing too is we've had to fly a couple motors back, and they weren't hurt bad, very minimum, and they had a fair amount of time on them, but not overtime. Um, but it cost $5,000-6,000 each way to fly a motor.
Yeah. That is certainly not cheap. Well, we love seeing, the insight into the Hot Wheels Monster Trucks live tour that, Frank's able to give us on a near weekly basis, but hearing, from folks like yourself that are involved in such a deep level, I think um, you know, there's a lot of different opinions people throw out one way or the other about it. And I think a lot of folks just don't know enough about what's happening behind the scenes to actually make this stuff work. I mean, to me, from a business standpoint, it almost feels more like you guys are a group of bands on tour trying to do your thing and keep a tour running, which is really complex. There's just so many moving parts. You're all over the world. Um, any monster truck fan that discounts the difficulty of what you guys are doing probably hasn't traveled internationally even once. That alone is a bit of a headache, crossing borders and trying to inventory everything I'm sure that you have in these containers so you're not violating whatever you want to call it, any customs rules. You're not looking for a Bigfoot 9 situation anytime soon, I guess is what I'm driving at, right?
Well, we hope not. We have a pretty extensive library as far as everything we have. Of course, the values and everything we have to do. The shipping company is really great to work with. Chad Fortune, that used to be a or a Monster Jam driver. He actually works for the company
Oh, wow.
now, and so there's a lot of insight there. Um, we have 4 custom fitted containers. We bought our own containers and custom fitted them and everything. Um, they're not like our transporter, but they're pretty nice.
That's
And
cool.
the you know what's really amazing, the shows will be sometimes there's 3 4 shows a weekend, and there's just no time. You may have an hour and a half between the shows, and then we only have Friday, part of Thursday, and mostly Friday to prepare. Then Saturday and Sunday, it's just nonstop. I mean, they start at 7 in the morning, and then wrap up about 10 each day at night. And then when the show is over on Sunday afternoon or Sunday night, the trucks are waiting outside to pick the containers up. So you can't fix or work on them after the show's over on Sunday. They got to be
Oh, wow.
loaded and down the road.
That's really wild. I mean, that does sound like a concert tour, though. I mean, you're not hardly done with your last trip to the bathroom before you catch a ride back to the hotel after the rock show, and the trailers are already in the docks putting, drums and rigging and all that kind of stuff
You
away.
got to
So,
put all that stuff back in,
yeah.
and we have 5 pit carts
Oh man.
and 4-wheeler, and we have the kitty carts. Um, you know, my grandson and my granddaughter each have their own cart that goes to the dressing room, and it's quite an ordeal. And we've got a couple young men from Manchester in the UK that are on our team, and Kristen and Nick Minguez do a phenomenal job. And um, I mean, it's hard work. A lot of people think, well, that show is not Monster Jam. It's not this. Well, it's not intended to be. it's a show that's geared towards young children. I
Yep.
mean, it's monster trucks like Sesame Street, something like that. But when you see how invested the people are over there, you can't take that away from the job that these guys are doing.
Yeah. Well, if Monster Jam takes Crush Cars away, people bitch. If Hot Wheels gives you nothing but Crush Cars, people bitch. So I'd say just keep doing what you're doing, because if it's putting, people in the stands, then obviously for the public it's working. So I think a lot of credit there. I have one last dumb question before we go diving off into the old school side of this show. But in all seriousness, do you convert or intentionally build your trucks that go over there to use metric fasteners and things like that at all, just in case you did need something, or you just send over a shitload of nuts and bolts that are all SAE?
Well, I don't know which is bigger, a shitload or a boatload. Between the two, we have both of them filled, and I'm not exaggerating. Parts and supplies, we are probably at about $400,000 worth of stuff.
I believe it though. Yeah.
Okay. And the thing about it, and I'm not saying that to brag, it's just you don't have the options. We one of our favorite stores in the UK is called Machine Mart, and that's basically like Harbor Freight.
All right.
And they're in Glasgow, Scotland. I think they know us by our first names. um, so, and also, you can get on Amazon, you can do this and do that. I mean, I'm old school. I'm so technically, tech challenged. It's not even funny. And with the younger generation, your generation, stuff like they just get on the phone. Next thing you boom, there was a, there was a damn, truck coming in the next day with a part. And so I know when Donald Epidemia was over a couple years ago, he bought these remote controlled helicopters out of nowhere for us to play with. So um, so anyway, that's the thing is as far as there's nothing metric on our trucks at all. So there's we have a lot of stuff. We really
Yeah.
do. It's overkill, but the thing about it is, no matter how overkill it is, if you don't have it, you're done.
Yeah.
There's only
Absolutely.
there's only 7 trucks. Okay, all 7 trucks count, and now the tour has 3 Bigfoot trucks and 4 of our trucks, and 23 and 24, we built, and we just finished 25, but it's still here in the States. Um, I think it's 19, wherever the CRD chassis is, everything on it came from us. So, and the thing is, everybody works so well together. Like if you see some of the pictures, they changed in intermission at one show, they changed the third member, all the axles and stuff in the back of the truck, and they were out there for freestyle. And
Mm.
Darren with Bigfoot and their crew, Rebecca, everybody pitched in and changed out a third member and had completely rebuilt both planetaries in like 20 minutes.
Awesome. So you can put a value on the parts, but you can't put a value on a crew that works that tightly, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And like I say, Rick is he runs the program and stuff. And like I say, uh, Christian's right. If I'm working on a planetary, she just comes and pulls me and yanks me out of there and says, "Here, I'll take care of this." And so, like I say, all of them they're a really, really group. I'm very proud of them.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you should be, and sounds like they all have to work a little bit harder than Frank does. I feel like Frank, you have a little easy out there, man. Like, step it up. I want to see you running like this Patrick crew out there.
Hey man, we're doing what we can do. This the old Monster Trucks limited operation, man. It's me, DJ Bolts, and James Calhoun. We're getting by. We're doing well. The trucks are running phenomenally, and they're both PEI trucks. So I mean that's a testament to Dan's stuff. And Richard Midget Motors, and get help from a lot of people. But man, the trucks are running well. And like Dan said, our tour is the same way. You got the Bigfoot guys, Eric Steinberg and Kellen Williams and Cameron Tweedy. There's a lot of great people, and the Holmans too. We everybody works together, and I think it's a testament what Hot Wheels has actually put together here. You got people together that get along and just want to make the trucks run for the good of the event. I mean, we all want to win, but in the grand scheme of stuff, if 7 trucks aren't running, it looks a little shoddy. So we're the same way in our domestic tour. I know there's 2 running over here now, but I mean, we're like a big happy family on our tour. So I can't say enough for how Dan's operation is doing over there internationally. It's amazing. Running 4 trucks over there is outstanding. But we're having a great time with our 2 trucks, and really, I can't say it's just 2 trucks because the way our tour runs, like Dan said, it's like a group of 7 trucks all working together to make the same thing happen. So I could be happier with what we're doing with the Hot Wheels tour.
Well, I'd have to say then that's a pretty good segue into, where we want to steer with tonight's conversation. And if you've got that kind of unity across the tour, I mean, I can't help but think that that sort of reflects on how things were, Dan, when you guys were running for USA Motorsports, way back in the day. And we'll get into that deeper, but would you say that's a fair comparison up front, that just everybody's kind of in it for the good of the show above all else?
Well, the show is you want people to be entertained and come back. When I first started running for USA back in when I first started with Monsters, they gave me 2 requirements. Make sure you come to the displays, everything is clean, you look good. We don't care who wins. Keep the truck out of the stands. Anything after that's a perk, you
Yeah.
know. So,
Absolutely.
so anyway, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, we were competitive, and if you're in the motorsports, you're going to be competitive. But the whole thing about the Hot Wheels tour, it's a show geared around young, children, and it's yeah, it's going to be competitive. But the problem is too, you need to be there at every round. So I'm not saying you lay down anything, but you don't drive over your abilities, and you don't take unnecessary risk. The thing about it is our trucks are way overpowered for what we're doing. All of them, even Frank's, their stuff too is overpowered for what we're doing. So if you just go out there and get so caught up in yourself or your ego, you're going to tear a lot of stuff up,
Hmm.
and which is not going to get you through the night.
Yep. Well, and it just seems to me, like you said, I mean, the schedule's packed so tightly that if you are trying to make the show too much about yourself and what you're doing as a driver out there, then ultimately you're just going to hurt the show, because now the show's going to be down at least the truck, as the weekend progresses, which isn't what you want. But as we move on from that a little bit here, and like I said, we want to have you on multiple times because we know the depth of your story, but help us, particularly for viewers that maybe aren't as familiar with your backstory. Before we get to the USA talk, which we're focusing on so heavily here in season 3 of Bottom Dead Center, how did you kind of get your start playing with motors and dirt and horsepower and all of that there in Central Ohio?
Well, I was a farm boy growing up on a farm. My dad and my uncle pulled tractors back in the 1950s and 60s. And so, you know, we didn't have motorsports wise, there just wasn't a lot of options and things to do. And because what they did, and both my uncle and my dad were pretty good at what they did, and they won a lot of stuff and were very creative. And so when I was in high school, my uncle had a Massey Harris tractor with a Lincoln Continental motor in it. And he pulled, and um, he gave me the opportunity to drive it when I was, I think, a senior in high school. And then they used to have a thing where you could have 2 drivers, one tractor, and they could run twice. Well, my uncle would let me pull it also, and I kept beating him. And then after about 5 or 6 events, he told me I need to get my own tractor. And so my senior year in high school, my dad and I took a cockshut 40 tractor and put a 396 Chevy in it, and that's kind of where things started there. And ironically, I still have parts of that tractor, and we're kind of restoring it and retro making it. And so this year at Open House, we're going to show that off, and we plan on taking it to Bowling Green to the National Tractor Pulls events to the museum. And then also we're going to restore my one funny car puller. And so we've got this stuff around. Then we also have the old school, my original truck I bought from Don Maples. We're going to try to get it restored in the next couple years.
Oh man, that is exciting. Coors body on the funny car, right? Right?
Well, right now it's Keystone beer. That was the
Okay,
last
that
paint
works.
job on it because Coors just kept changing us from
Yep.
one brand to another. And I'm trying to, I've got people in New England looking for my Warlord car.
Oh wow.
It's rumor has it that it is still intact, and so we're trying to find that one.
Shout out, we need to call in Chris Mormanis and Mike Krieger. My God, those two guys could work for the NSA. I swear they could find anything. So if they're not already on the case, we'll sick them on it here. But so as your polling career started to take off, obviously you got deeper into it. You didn't stick around to the local or, nearby county fair circuit. So how did things blow up for you after high school?
Well, so I graduated in '73, and to the young people, that was last century. Um, and then um, when I got into polling, it was very early, and so it was just V8s and farm tractors. And within 5 years, to give you an example, when my first tractor was a Cockshutt 40 with a big block Chevy, it weighed 5,000 pounds. All you could do to get it into class. Within 5 years, I had a twin engine tractor, supercharged motors, and big tires and all that in the 5,000 pound class. So, and that was kind of like the same way with the monster trucks in the early years. There was just so much leaps and bounds in the early years of technology changing. Um, got a phone call in the winter. This promotion company was doing a poll indoors in Huntington, West Virginia, and they were looking for some people. And some of the bigger guys around here, the Richard McPherson, stuff like that. I got a phone call from them, and they say, they're doing a poll down in Huntington, West Virginia. And so I went down. It was in the winter, and I went down, and that's where I met for the first time. I met George Carpenter, and these promoters were out of Chicago, and the three guys, their name was Ed Thayer, Bob, George, and Tony Vaccaro. That was the original owners of US Hot Rod.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was called Truckorama or something
Yep.
like that. And they were doing polling, and George Carpenter and I just struck off a friendship, and they asked me to go to some other polls. And one of them was Chicago. And my introduction to Chicago was my trailer broke down in the middle of the Dan Ryan Freeway.
Oh man.
And then I get to the pole at Rosemont, and I got my toolbox up on the frame of the tractor, and I go down for them to let me in the door, and I come up in my toolbox. Somebody stole my toolbox.
Oh man.
And welcome to Chicago.
Yeah.
And so, and it just kind of started from there. And then in '82 and '83, I started pulling all over the country, and that's when they changed the name. For a while they were called the National Hot Rod Tractor and Truck Pulling Association. Then they kind of got into some grief with NHRA, and then that's when the U.S. Hot Rod thing came about. And we were doing pulling. So Alan Gaines, Orange Blossom Special, the Gewans, Oklahoman, and Black Gold from Oklahoma. And there was about a dozen of us, Art Arfons and Tim Arfons. We were kind of a group, and we were kind of the core of their show, and we went all over the country. I did 29 events in '83 pulling, and all over the country. And so that's where it took off. And the funny cars came in where Bob George asked me, I told him, if you give me a little bit more money, I'll put 2 more motors on my tractor. And he said, Dan, I don't care if you put 10 on there. People they don't recognize that anyway. If you want to do anything, build me a funny car. It looked like it just came off the drag strip.
Oh yeah.
And so I kind of drug my feet on it because if I build it and it doesn't work, what am I going to do with it? I can't hardly afford to build it to begin with. So Tim Marfon's come out with a turbine powered one, and it went pretty well. And then they got to ride me. When's this going to happen? So we got the thing done. We brought it out in '84, and within 3 months, I had a toy contract with Play School, and things just materialized. In '85, we built a second car. Then in '86, we got teamed up with Tom McEwen with Coors, and we were with Coors for 3 years with that, and then I decided to quit traveling and stuff. We had some family issues at home with some family members that we lost, and um, it was a very tough time for my wife, Chris. And so I decided I can't. I just need to stay home. And I did that for about a year and a half, and I got antsy. And then we got into the monster trucks, and the only way I got into monster trucks, Don Maples and I were good friends. He called wanting to buy a trailer I had, and I ended up buying the damn truck.
That backfired on you a little then, huh?
Well, my wife says, "Did you sell that trailer?" I says, "Nope, gonna kind of need it." And she goes, "What?" And I go, "Yeah, I bought a monster truck." And I was all prepared for a big throwdown. Were you dumb?
Yeah.
And actually, it went pretty well. And so that's how that evolved.
I was gonna say we could have said let the record show that twice Don Maples sold a monster truck called Samson and it pissed somebody off.
Well, yeah, I won't get into that whole mess there. But but when I bought it, I said, "Do you own the rights to the name?"
Mm,
And he says, "Yes." I says, "You didn't sell that to the other people?" "No." And he didn't have anything trademarked or anything. So I got on it right away, and all that litigation with stuff was going on. And
yep.
I knew it was a short-term deal with both people that was involved in it. And so, they weren't going to do much with it other than, a program they were going to do with a promoter on the West Coast.
Yep.
And so anyway, when I called for some promoters and I said, "Hey, I got a monster truck," and they, "Oh, great, another puller with a monster truck."
Mm,
And I go, "Well, I bought the Samson truck." Okay. Well, did you get the new one or the old one?" I said, "No, I got the new one," because at that time, the '88 body style had just happened.
yep.
And there was a lot of guys, of course, we all had steel body trucks back then, and nobody was just going to make that big random change. And so, um, that's how my thing with US, pretty my deal with USA started. Because they
Gotcha.
were
So,
sponsored by Chevrolet trucks, and also they were sponsored by Coors.
yep. So backing up, just so you know, we did get into, and this was in one of my written pieces, we did dive pretty deep into the Samson fiasco between Bigfoot and Golden State, and it's kind of funny how, all that stuff ended up, shaking out on all of that. And I can't tell you how many times I pulled that trailer when I was at Bigfoot before I realized it was Maples' old trailer. That
Right.
was what they
Yeah.
got out of the deal, was a trailer for Bigfoot Fast Tracks.
Well, there was that. And see, the thing is, Bob supported me through the whole thing, and Seth you know, kind of had the red butt about it. But the thing is, you know, it at the time it was a very popular truck. I mean, and I think it still probably is a popular truck, but
Totally.
at the time there wasn't a lot of options out there. You had you had Barefoot, Taurus, Virginia Giant, and of course Bigfoot and Barefoot. There was only maybe seriously a dozen really what you call really hot trucks at the time.
So I know in the past when you and I have, been able to bullshit on the phone or in person or whatever, you had told me some pretty interesting stories about the architecture of both Samson 1 and Samson 2. And to fans that might not be familiar, if those two trucks look really similar to a couple other trucks that you've seen back then, there's kind of a reason behind that. Shed a little light on that for us, if you would.
Don Maples is a very gifted fabricator, and he's a great duplicator. Goes to great lengths. Excuse me. And so his first truck, Samson 1, is a clone of the very first Taurus barefoot trucks. And Jack Willman's truck, Taurus 1, or their first truck. So um, the truck that I bought from Don is an identical clone of Bigfoot 7.
Mm.
And I tell you how good he was at it. When I rolled the thing over in Montreal and we had the body completely off, that was the end of the steel body. It was in the shop. And my deal with Bob is when I worked there, I got a bay for myself, and then a road tractor if I needed it or whatever, because I didn't have a road tractor when I went to work there. Got one shortly thereafter. But he was telling Roy
Roy
Hoosier, he
Hoosier.
says, I want you to cut this off, do this, change this. And he goes, I can't. He goes, why not? Well, it's not our truck. He says, that's Dan's truck. What? And he says, look at it. It's not our truck. It's Dan's truck. Well, looks just like it. He's over there measuring, and something might be off an eighth of an inch here and there, but it was seriously, everything was identical to Bigfoot 7. And he did it all with stick weld and a grinder and a torch. I mean, that was the only equipment he had. But he was really, really good. He old school fabrication. And if you heard his speech at the Hall of Fame, um, he said he only went to the 6th grade and he did it twice. And so hats off to Don, because it was amazing what he did with the equipment he had.
I think it's pretty impressive, and he certainly picked a couple of pretty nice trucks, for the era to emulate with the two Samson trucks. But we'll bounce back over to when you bought Samson 2 from him. So how do you go about getting gigs then? I mean, obviously the name and the quality of the truck have a little bit of currency, but how do you start pulling gigs when you've not really got any experience driving the truck?
Well, you got to know Don. So when we did the deal, I didn't have much money and stuff. And he said, what do you got to trade? If I would have had 26 coon dogs, I probably could have got the deal done that way. Don was, he was just one of those guys that, wheeled and dealed. And so the deal was he wanted $50,000 for the truck. Had all brand new Goodyear 6-ply tires, all brand new sheet metal. Motor was new. I mean, it was well worth the money at the time. And so I had a 80. So this is an 80, the end of 88. And I had an 85 S10 Blazer, really, really nice S10 Blazer. And he said, well, I'll trade you that Blazer for it. And I said, well, I ain't got anything to drive. I'd trade that. And he goes, well, you won't need to. You'll be out doing shows. And so I traded him that. And then in the deal, it came with 4 shows. He had a contract to do 4 shows. But he was going to drive. And so the first show was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We get there. I just have wearing some Docker pants, which was a popular pants at the time. Nice button down shirt. Get ready to do the show. And he goes, here's your helmet. And I go, your drives. Nope, belongs to you now. And so my experience was driving in the building. That was my experience.
And this is a U.S. hot rod show in a
This
hockey
was a
arena,
US
right?
hot rod, mud and monsters.
Yeah.
And it was before the camel stuff. But so Kenny Kelling was there with Bigfoot, and there was a couple other trucks. It was a mud thing. So he had a mud pit right down the middle of the Civic Center in Pittsburgh. On both sides of the pit was like 4 cars, and it was a roundy deal. You went over the cars, you went down over the pit, you come back around. So it was your old school, all Chicago style.
Hmm.
Okay, this thing had a $20 van seat in it, and just a four-point harness. He gave me this helmet, open faced helmet. And so put it on. He had a jacket. He did have some kind of a jacket. I put it on. Mike Hollingsworth from the old Tennessee Thunder days, he was with us, and so he strapped me in, pulled down the thing. Because the more he strapped it in, the farther I just sank down on that $20 van seat. And I pull up to the cars. Kenny was just so great with me. I says, Kenny, I don't know what to do. He says, when you get up to the cars and you don't see the cars anymore past the hood, that's when you hit the throttle. Okay. I pull up and back up, and the first thing, there was two things I said to myself. What in the hell did I just get myself into? And the other one, I wonder if I can cancel that check. And so I hit the cars. It hurt. I landed. It hurt. I went down around the end. I come over and shot over the cars. I landed, and I get out done. And I get out of the truck. And Kenny Kelly says, that was great. I go, what? He says, that was great. Well, then, that took away all the other stuff. And so that's kind of how it started. And I did 4 shows, and one story can roll in another, and
Yeah.
it would take us forever to go through them all.
Well, how does the USA thing come about? You do those first 4 shows. They were all
We do
US
the
hot
first
rod,
four
right?
shows, and so the deal was when I called and talked to Tim Murray, which I still deal with Tim Murray today with Hot Wheels. He was the president of USA. So I called him and I said, I bought a monster truck. And that's when he said, oh, great, another puller with a monster truck. Because some of the pulling guys crossed over. Dale Wilson was one. And there was a few other guys, Gary Cook, and with Equalizer. And so anyway, I said, well, I got the Samson truck. And he says, which one? I says, the new one. And they were looking for newer style body Chevrolet stuff because of their sponsorship with Chevrolet trucks. And so he says, well, I'll have somebody call you. Well, that was when I was introduced to Steve Wood, which then we became extremely tight and close friends over the years and still are. And he called me and he said, hey, I got a show in Winnipeg. I need you there. Can you go? And he said, I can use your funny car puller. And I said, okay. Well, in between doing the shows for at that time, the US Hot Rod, um, Charlie Mancuso, the president of US Hot Rod, is excited that, I bought this truck, and he was looking for somebody to, kind of beat up on Bigfoot because they dominated at the time. And they were trying to kind of spread that out a little bit. And of course, I wasn't the guy to do that at the time, and so they were doing an open competition in a purse race in Houston when Houston used to be their kind of big end of the year event.
Yeah.
Where they would do polling, and I don't know if they did mud, maybe they did. So worked out a deal. I went down there, and he says, you're going to be Bigfoot, aren't you? I said, I've only been in the truck for a couple weeks. But I didn't beat Bigfoot, and So I was on my way to Winnipeg to do a show for USA. And then I get a call from Jim Harris that says, well, Charlie wasn't happy with your performance in Houston, so I don't know what we're going to do about the next year. And we're going to have to cut the price down, and we're going to have to do this. We're not going to run your funny car. And I was coming off of like leaving the farm and all that. And I put everything I had in that truck at that time. And so I was just thinking, what's going to happen? So I get up there to Winnipeg and we run the funny car and we run the truck, and they were really happy. So they offered me all of these shows to run the funny car and then the truck and merchandise. I mean, it was a really, really nice package. And I said, well, when can you got to talk this over with something? No, this is the deal. I have the right, the authorization to do all this. So that's how I started with USA.
So that call from US Hot Rod while you're on the way to Winnipeg, like that kind of cemented in your mind. You're like, I don't think I like being talked to like this. I might be new at this monster truck stuff, but I've
Well,
been
that
around.
started my philosophy, and I got this from somebody else. It kind of a spinoff from a conversation with somebody. I was at that time in my life, I was beat down pretty good. Um, but things that I had no control over and had no choice in the matter of. And it was, I had a family farming operation with my parents and grandparents and all that. And so, here I am, 30 some years old with two small children and don't have much, and kind of, I had my racing stuff, and so um I tried to get on down at Kenworth Truck Company, where like a lot of my friends did, and they told me they didn't think I was capable of putting a Kenworth truck together. So um and I probably didn't sell myself very good at the time.
You talking about the
You're
truck plant down in
the truck
Chillicothe?
plant in Chillicothe, and I was trying to get to work there just to get a job. It's not that I really wanted to do it. And so anyway, on the way up there, a good friend of mine, Mike Hollingsworth, he said everything's going to work out, and I was pretty depressed. I'm not going to lie to you. I was really depressed. And as we're driving up the road, we spent a day and a half, 2 days driving from Houston to Winnipeg. And I looked over at him. I said, screw this. I said, I am never, ever going to let anybody ever make me feel like I'm nothing. And I said, I just leave that behind. And let's see how this weekend goes. And everything went phenomenal up there. And then when I get home from Winnipeg, I get a phone call from this Jim Harris. What do you think about what we talked about the other day? He says, oh, that's okay. Um, I'm going to run for USA. Um, why would you do that? And I said, well, they made me a pretty good offer, and I took it. You told me I wasn't worth a crap and you were going to cut my money. And I said, well, I don't want you to be disappointed with me, so I'm going to take that gig. And USA was comparable to US Hot Rod at the time. And that wasn't too long after US Hot Rod had bought up TNT.
Hmm.
So I did that, and I didn't do a US Hot Rod show for 4 years, 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Hmm.
And then I get so a few not too very long after I hung up the phone with Jim Harris, he calls me back and he says, well, Charlie's not happy about this at all. And I says, well, he's the one that kind of forced me to do this. And he says, well, you have a contract with him? I said, well, no, I've got a verbal agreement until the contract comes. Well, we just need to get this worked out. I go, no, I made a commitment to them. They made a commitment to me. I made a commitment to them. If they don't send me a contract, that's different. Okay. Wasn't an hour later. What can we do to make this happen? And I said, we can't do anything. It's done.
It's
And so that's the way it was. And, um, in the beginning, so that's where USA became an important part of my life.
So I saw you in, I think it was April or early May of 1989. I'm a youngster at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. You've got Samson out there. That's, of course, the infamous show where Kenny dumped six over, running over the hay bales and everything. Um, but I've seen some pretty interesting onboard footage from you driving then, and I can tell it had to have been pretty early in your driving career because it looked like it still had a plush van seat in the
It,
Samson. And buddy, you were going for, I mean, we can see you tensing up and bracing.
I don't even know what the seatbelts were for.
Yeah.
I think the seatbelts were just there to hurt me.
Yeah.
I was there and I was working for Foot at the time. I Bob came up to me in Pontiac at Silverdome, and I take that back. I did run up there
Hmm.
at Pontiac, and then Bob come up to me and he says, "Hey," he says, "would you be interested in coming to St. Louis and building trucks for me?" And I go, "What?" And he said, "Well, we need to do something in the racing series, and we need to build a tube. We need to do something." And he knew me from the play school things and from the pulling. I knew him at that point, 5 years, 6 years at the time, and then we always hit it off. And so I thought about it and thought about it for about a month, and because it was a huge step for me to move my family to go from the small community we're in to St. Louis, 3 million people, and which I drove through there today, and it's like, wow, I can't believe that. Takes me an hour to, used to take me an hour to get to work. Now it takes me 2 minutes, and it's 3 minutes if somebody's at the stop sign when I go up to the
Yeah.
corner. And then, so
So did Bob ask you to come to Foot because you obviously had tube chassis on your pullers, right? Is
yes,
so he knew you
yeah,
were good with tubing and that sort of thing already.
yeah. But at the time, um, it when I went out there and met with him and stuff, and he gave me some drawings to look at and stuff, and like I say, we were back and forth for a month, and I had a complete machine shop at the time, and I ran into some issues with zoning. We had some neighbors that wasn't happy about me having a welding shop and a machine shop out in the country, and so I kind of got shut down on that, and that kind of pushed me into the back into the monster truck thing and the traveling. So I ended up moving all of that out there. Andy and Gene came with semi, and we loaded all that stuff up. And so then that's when they built me a room in the back, and I had a really nice gig there because. I had my own room, my own phone, and everything. So I went in the morning and I went in the back and, didn't come out to the end of the day. Did that for a long time. But so the time at Arrowhead, I had worked there a month and a half, maybe. And so, of course, I was scheduled to do the Arrowhead show. And so I remember, I forget which one of the crew guys there at Foot took my truck to Kansas because Bob wanted me to stay at the shop as much as I could.
Hmm.
So he'd actually have guys take my rig and stuff to the shows, and I would fly to the shows. And Jim Kramer took when he was recuperating from a shoulder or hands or something. I remember he drove my rig to New Haven, Connecticut, and I flew up there. He was my crew guy for the weekend.
That might be where we've seen the famous photo of Jim wearing a Coors Extra Gold crew
And
shirt.
my well, then but So I wanted to get a picture of him. He's wiping the truck down and stuff. I should have got a picture of that at the time. But but we had to steal beds in there and stuff. So we went to Arrowhead. I remember going to the motorhome with Kenny and there was Dale Coon and I don't know if Ralph was there or not. They did the video stuff when Bob had the video company, and Donna was along, and Donna Purcell, and so we went, and so I was just so shocked that I won Saturday night, and I won Sunday afternoon, and here I am. We were going back to Bigfoot on Monday, and here I won this week, and I beat Kenny, and of course, now Kenny rolled the truck over, but I won. I go, well, I'll probably get fired. But I will say this: Bob was always supportive of when I would do well, and Bob came to some events that I was at that their trucks weren't at. Bob and I had we had every place has a love hate thing, but we had, what was great about Bob and I's working relationship is that he had his computers and his drawing stuff like that. I couldn't do those things. His drawings, you couldn't build this stuff the way it was drawn. So, but it showed me what he was thinking, what he wanted in the end. And then and like he'd put a tube in for a chassis and it might be 17 bends in that one piece. There's no way you're going to make that. But I would change it, then I would build it, and then he would redraw it the way I built it. And, so that it worked well that way. I know we're getting off the thing, but that was the thing, is when I did the thing, and he did a video, and remember this thing would smoke. It had those damn boat headers on it, and the Samson truck did.
Yeah.
And when the thing would really get hot, this thing had those vacuum things on the valve covers, and the damn thing would blow smoke out of it. It looked like a train. And if you ever watched some of that old video, it showed it when it's going around and from Kenny dumped it over, and then I'm driving around the end passing him, and the smoke's coming out. They put a train whistle in the video.
We've got
the
that
audio part of the video.
We can drop that in the show right now. We've got that. We'll drop.
Oh,
it
you
in.
have that one?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, that was good.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
that was a interesting show too. So and
I ran the funny car there too.
Yeah, and we're staying within the USA conversation here because, of course, this is USA's marquee hometown stadium event. But that was widely considered to be the competition debut of Taurus 3, their first stage 3 tube chassis truck.
That was the very beginning, and they were having issues. I don't. I think the issues was the shocks at the time. They basically took two coilover shocks and put them together, and I think they kept breaking in the center where they attached them together. I'm not sure on that, but that was in the very early stages of the truck.
As you're looking at that truck in Kansas City, and what you've got going on in the early stages, back in St. Louis, are you looking at it thinking, okay, we can out engineer this thing, or are you looking at it like, oh boy, we better catch up? They're a little ahead of us.
No, the thing about it is, and I'm going to be honest with you, is I had no clue. I never was into trucks. I was never into off-road stuff. My deal was pulling. And so it wasn't, it was really Jim and Bob were the lead on it. I was the fabricator. I took their visions and made them into reality. That was my job. And now, and Andy Brass was part of it too, because Andy was a phenomenal welder. He used to work at a company in St. Louis called General Dynamics. They did a lot of stuff for McDonnell Douglas. So he was a really advanced heliarc welder, TIG welder, and so my deal was MIG welding. And I wasn't all that great at the time. I remember one time after we had built Bigfoot 8, and he dumped it a couple times, testing it over at St. Louis, East St. Louis. And of course, he was very, very straightforward with his opinions. And I did a weld, wasn't that great. And he looks at it and says, "You ain't a very good welder." And I said, "Well, you can't drive a truck to save your ass, but we both still got our jobs."
That's great.
So, but anyway, it
The
was kind of like that old cartoon with the dog and, where they would fight, chicken and the dog, they would fight all day. And then
yeah.
they'd clock out at the end of the day. And Andy and I would argue back and forth. Then 1 o'clock would hit. And he said, "You going to lunch?" "Yeah, let's go."
We're
You
off to
know,
Mattingly's.
off to Manly's.
Yep.
And Jay Dig would go, "What is it with you two? You sit there and scream at each other all morning, then you go to lunch together."
Yeah. Kramer was telling us a funny story of that same day when Andy dumped at Teston when you guys were out there. And now you've given us our second Andy Brass impression on the show, which is pretty cool. But Kramer said, "Hey, Andy, this thing's great. You're going to have a blast driving it. You can't hardly roll the thing." And then Andy goes out and rolls it. And he goes, "God damn it, Kramer, you told me I couldn't roll this thing." He's
I
like, "Well,
heard that. I drove over there later,
okay."
and as I was driving, he dumped it over. And as I'm walking across there, I can hear, "You said you couldn't drop this thing." And I thought, and this is
Verified
pretty
on
good.
multiple sources here on Bottom Dead Center. We have,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
that actually happened, And then, because usually we would go over there. Um, Andy and Gene usually drove the rig over with the truck, and um, then I could go into all the different things we did over there. We really had a good time testing and stuff. And then every once in a while, Bob would look at me and says, "You want to drive?" And I go, "Well, yeah, I'll drive." And so at the time when we first tested the truck, we just had a 460 in it with a carburetor on it. We didn't. It wasn't a blower motor and stuff in there. And we did a lot of testing. The biggest thing we were after at the time is to make the thing fly with the front end up. And so we did a lot of that with maybe moving some weight and things like that. And then eventually I built a set of ramps. When they come home with that Tango and Cash movie, Bob gave me a drawing. He had this thing about some ramps. So I built these really pretty nice ramps. And then we take over and we would test it with those ramps.
Hmm. So getting back to the USA thing, Frank, I think growing up around Detroit, mainly just had US hot rod shows up there. Maybe not a lot of USA stuff, but were you at that Silverdome show in early '89, let's call it, or late '88 when Dan was up there running against those guys?
I absolutely was.
All
Frank
right.
Sr. and myself were there. I remember seeing Dan Patrick driving Samson, which I'm like, wait a minute, that's Don Maple's truck. But then the older I got, I put two and two together. But I remember the video. I remember Dan coming around the corner, having a little issue getting around the turn, and some smoke firing out of the headers. And I remember it like it was yesterday.
The belt came off the power steering pump. And every time I was close to winning a race, that damn belt would come off.
Never failed. That's funny. So as the USA thing is working for you, I mean, you already had the Coors deal, right? So you kind of take that to USA with you. So was that something
Well,
that
no, I
you
didn't have the Coors deal was over for me.
okay with the funny
At
car?
with the funny car with Tom McEwen, that was supposed to be 86, 87, 88. Well, Coors, they weren't big into motorsports at the time. They were more rodeo Western, as you're involved with Coors, they were
Yeah.
all about rodeo at the time. And so the only reason they were kind of doing the drag racing thing, and my deal was part of McEwen's deal.
Okay.
And because they became nationwide in '86. So they went east of the Mississippi River because, of course, a lot new generation now doesn't remember. Coors was only available west of the Mississippi.
Yep.
and it was considered bootlegging on this side if you brought it over here. Well, because of the expansion and Coors, a family-owned brewery and stuff, they didn't have a distributor network of any kind east of the Mississippi. And so they would work with private distributors that maybe Stroh's, Miller, then those guys would have, some, um, they'd have their domestic beers and they'd have their non-domestic beers. And so um, that was part of the expansion. Well, as people change in companies, and you well know this, the focus got away kind of from motorsports. They pulled out of NASCAR a little bit later, and that did not work well for them because distributors was ready to just tell them to take their beer and shove it, and so they stayed in NASCAR. But they got out of about any other kind of motorsport there was, and so my deal ended in '87 when Tom's did. But the car, was still painted and stuff, and people asked me to bring it and stuff. So we didn't do much with it. But um, so the people that I worked with was still there at Coors. And then when USA, they actually wore Coors brand, then it changed to that Coors Extra Gold.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know if it was Coors Light for a bit, but I think it was just.
Well, if I can shed a little light on it, so what I've been able to piece together, and we still got to talk to Scott Stevens to learn a little bit about his truck involvement, with the Bruiser and the Top Dog truck, but Coors was kind of erratic with their focus on motorsports, and it seemed like they moved on from the Coors brand pretty quick to Coors Light, and then stepped it down even more to Extra Gold.
See, when I was there, the Coors brand. So they went to Coors Light. The original Coors was considered a light beer, but when Miller Lite came out, with their advertising and all that, people were focused on the word light, and so actually then Coors started making Coors Light, and which really wasn't much different than the Coors original, but anyway, they had budgets for each brand. So whoever was selling the most beer, whether it was Coors Light or Coors, they got the most advertising dollars. Okay. And so when they come out with that, when let me back up. So when Scott had it, it was Coors. And so the reason Scott wanted to focus on the Penda racing or the TNT racing.
Yeah.
And he wanted to focus strictly on that. And he had some kind of a deal with Auto Value at the time. And so he was giving up his part of the deal. So the sponsorship wasn't directly with Coors and him. It was part of USA's package.
Yep.
And so then when Scott said he didn't want to do it, that's when I got a call from Tim Murray and Steve Wood. Hey, we want you to come to Kansas City and talk to us because Scott's going to give up his deal and we want you to take it over. Well, so when I told Bob and Jim what they want to do, they were concerned that, well, I'm going to go to Kansas City and I'm going to come back and quit. And it was kind of a great thing because USA looked at it as, we don't make it juicy enough for him, he's not going to take it. And so I just kind of kept my mouth shut, and it worked out on both ends. And and then I think it was Coors Extra Gold we was going to, and nobody wanted to drink that crap at all. And
I missed that crap. That was my favorite 30 rack.
Well, but the thing about that was funny is, how serious beer drinkers the mud racer guys was. There would be cases and cases of Coors Extra Gold beer at the end of the weekend, and they wouldn't take it home.
Oh man.
And that's pretty bad. But we were in a show in New York, and the distributor said that was his number one selling beer. So that was the only place in the continental United States that I think liked Coors Extra Gold.
It had
Then
it
they
had its
switched.
pockets.
Yeah, then they switched us over to Keystone. What was really nice about Keystone was Keystone and Keystone Light, and was it Keystone Extra Dry or something like
There was
that?
a Keystone Dry and a Keystone Ice also, I think.
Yeah, there was all of that was under one umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of support with that. So the funny car body is in the shop now, still is painted like the Keystone beer
Yep.
one. And then, but underneath of it is the Coors Extra Gold, and underneath that one is the original Coors,
Red
and
Coors.
underneath that is the Red Baron color. I wish it'd be like vinyl; you could peel each level off,
Yeah, no kidding.
But it saved me a lot of money on redoing that. But anyway, so my deal was exclusively with United Sports,
Hmm.
and the downside of that was nobody outside of them really wanted to book a beer truck,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't want Samson on it. It was just a Keystone beer truck.
Yeah. Well, and
And
what I think was interesting too is at this point, Anheuser-Busch is spending gobs of money to sponsor anything that needs sponsored in the 80s. And I think Coors felt the pressure, not just trying to build a nationwide distribution network, but also to just spend some marketing money to try and counterpoint Bud a little bit, which I think USA proved to be their sort of foil against, Budweiser US Hot Rod type stuff. You got Chevy trucks with USA, you've got Ford trucks with US Hot Rod, you've got Budweiser at US Hot Rod, you got, some derivative of Coors products on the USA side. So I think it actually makes that from a marketing standpoint pretty compelling, pretty sensible. And as a beer guy now, I see the path of starting with Coors Original, which is what we now call a premium domestic, and then stepping down, not down, but then laterally to Coors Light, which is a premium domestic light, and then to Keystone and Extra Gold, which are called sub premiums in our world. But that's the target demographic they're looking for. They want that hard working blue collar guy out there that buys it by the 24 pack or the 30 pack, and they want to sell them a whole shitload of light beer all at one time, and use a monster truck or a puller or whatever it takes
well,
to.
I think the Keystone brand was a really good brand at the time for the college market too.
Mm-hmm.
And my one brother-in-law, which was a diehard Coors Light drinker, he moved over to the Keystone brands. And I know when we went through the brewery the one time, and you could see all the beer, flowing on the floor into the drains and stuff. The guy that was with me said when he died, he wanted to be reincarnated as a drain there, and and so, but I had a meeting actually. I had a very good meeting with Anheuser-Busch,
Mm.
and we talked to them, and they were very interested. Actually, there was a guy, his name was Lauren. I can't remember his last name. He was kind of the rep for the US Hot Rod at the time. And so this was in like 84, 85. And he talked to me about doing something and things. So and it didn't materialize, but he was one of the very first people. One of the first shows I did was Madison Square Gardens in 86, and he was there, and he made it a point to come over and congratulate me, and he was very happy. And he's like, I can't believe our company did not follow through, because I shot video of your car. I want to go back, and says, here, we missed this opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, and what was funny was I got a plaque, and I think I still have it at the shop. They gave an award out for the most something the Budweiser did, and here I got it there at Madison Square Gardens, at a Budweiser sponsored deal.
That's pretty
And
awesome.
and so, but yeah, he was a very nice gentleman.
So as will kind of bounce up to the early 90s now, so more and more operators, teams, owners are building stage 3 trucks. They're seeing what you did with Bigfoot 8, Bigfoot 9. They're seeing what Taurus and Equalizer and these other guys have done. And we won't go, down that road a whole lot more for this episode anyways. But as far as your operation goes, with USA. At what point did you kind of decide to step away from the Bigfoot thing? When did that end? But you guys obviously still kept running USA alongside Bigfoot quite a bit at the time still. So it seemed like you still had some kind of connection even after you quit working there.
Well, I was there exactly 3 years. So I was there March of '89 to March of '92. And I was kind of just getting pulled in every different direction, you know. At the time, when I first went there, I was there just to build the chassis and help build the trucks. And when I left there, I was building the trucks and building the motors, and I had my operation. And one of the two biggest mistakes is Bob wanted me to be the shop foreman, and I took the job, and it should have been Roy, in which Roy ended up taking or being in that spot. I just got too overwhelmed with things. I just was pulled in every direction. My family, it was a huge struggle for my family. My oldest daughter Natalie, wasn't doing good in school. I was just traveling so much, and I was getting, all these guys on the road. Hey, will you build me this? Will you do this and do this? And I didn't do anything out, and I didn't build a truck for myself. I just didn't have the money to do it at the time. And I can honestly say I stayed so devoted to the brand of Bigfoot. And, I just, it was just, it was just a thing where, um, I don't know. It was a right thing to kind of to come back home. I just wasn't a big city guy, and like I say, I was just traveling so much, and it was a tremendous, toll on my family at the time.
I love asking this question of fellow dads, especially girl dads, but my girls, they can, just like yours did and probably still do sometimes, they can drive you crazy, but we love it, right? It's the best job in the world, I think, is being a girl dad. And they can pull up my heartstrings the minute that they walk out of my sight. How was that for you, traveling so much and working so much and still trying to find time to be just dad?
Well, I just felt that, and I got reminded of this once in a while. I felt that I don't say I was neglecting it. My wife and I, or Chris, had this deal. I traveled, I made a living, and she took to raising the kids and stuff like that. Um, it wasn't. She didn't have hardly any social life there. It's it. I guess when you're new in a neighborhood, people kind of think you're just going to be here for a shot, and they don't really warm up to you. And so, um, yeah, I think that a lot of it. And then, um, uh, I got to the point where I think they were questioning my loyalty to the company. And you know how it is in places, you have your cliques and groups, and it just seemed like, I don't know. Again, it was just time for me to, the U.S. Everything was growing. Everything was growing. Okay, my
Hmm.
deal was growing with the truck and the other opportunities, and I had a really nice shop at home that I left to come out there. Um, Andy was gone. Um, so I just decided that was it. I didn't want to butt heads anymore. I didn't want to argue and fight for everything I wanted and be part of that anymore. I don't know. It was time to go.
It sounds like it got exhausting eventually. I mean, you're running a segment of someone else's very large business, but you're running your own business at the same time as well, which was, no small cookies either.
Well, the thing is, um, a lot of people today don't realize all the struggles a lot of the guys back in that era went through to be able to do trucks. We went from having basically originally show trucks into competition trucks.
Right.
And where you were kind of paid to go to a show. And then when you had open competitions, guys maybe went but found out that they couldn't compete. And so they just went back to the paid shows thing. I mean, it kind of still goes today. Even later on with the Pro MT stuff, we were part of that, is guys go, I am not going to come there and run all hard all weekend for $2,000 when I can get $2,500 to go to a display. Well, that makes perfectly good sense, but it doesn't make the sport grow.
Right. So, through your tenure in the '90s, how did USA change? Let's say maybe after US Hot Rod Pace SRO, whatever you want to call them, they bought TNT at the end of 1990. Did you see a lot of change on the USA side? Like, did they change how they went to market or anything like that?
Not so much in that they were never competition oriented. Um, the it kind of came back to the old thing, is like show up, keep your truck out of the stands, and things like that. They didn't care who won, but you're still going to have that competition. USA shows, a lot of guys like doing them because there was no freestyle.
Hmm.
You had straight line racing, then you had Chicago style racing, and that was pretty much it. It was a low key deal. You had two people that came to each show. One ran the front office, and the other guy ran the floor. And they had people that would come in and do the demo derby part of it or the polling part of it. Harbucks, Jim and Paula Harbuck, they ran the mud racing part of it. And it was a very organized deal. There was no yelling and screaming. The U.S. hot rod stuff was a lot tenser. I enjoyed, later on doing the hot rod stuff. They make you more competitive and they make you better. They kind of push you a lot harder than USA did. Um, but I at that time was doing primarily stadium stuff,
Hmm.
and in the same way with US Hot Rod, because later on I started doing some US Hot Rod, and I kind of split it between US Hot Rod and USA. Um, and so um, but as far as when we got the television stuff, the TNN Friday night live deal,
Hmm.
um, we were a big fixture of that. Um, and the Penda series helped with that. When I did the Penda series, because we were kind of recruited to do the Penda series, because they were looking for some better stuff, and it helped me with USA and also US Hot Rod because that was the only television that was out there.
Right. What was the yeah, let's jump ahead a little bit to that. The live TV stuff. What was that like? Being in those arenas or occasional stadium setups, knowing that everything was live going out on TV that night. That had to be pretty exciting.
It had its pluses and minuses. The problem that I had was not having a water cooled motor, where I ran the Hemis since day one, as far as in the race trucks. Um, they wouldn't let us start the motors and warm them up before the show
Oh.
because they were doing their B-roll stuff or getting ready and all that. And to give you an example, one time in Kansas City, it was so cold, and it's always cold in Kansas City at
Hmm.
Kemper. Um, I'm sitting there forever, and I'm the first truck where I'm going to run right off the bat. And when I started, it was so cold, starter kicked back and broke the damn starter.
Oh.
And so that dragged me out of there. And then that happened to me at the RCA Dome, where they wouldn't let us warm up or anything. And I went out and I was the first truck to run and running, 80 weight nitro oil. And I went out and blew an oil line off. I had no idea how much oil I pumped out of it. I was out for the competition, because I lost because of that.
Hmm.
And actually I got to the point where I told them, I said, don't book me any more of these TV shows. And they go, why not? And I said, because TV is dictating what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, I'm getting just royally screwed on this deal. And it looks like my stuff can't get down the track. And I said, just keep me out of it. And then at the end of the night, the producer of the series comes over and says, Dan, we have to have you in this series. And I says, well, we've got to do something different about you're not letting us prepare our vehicles.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I don't want to do there. And I said, well, okay. Then next weekend I will not be at that show. I'm gonna ask them to put me somewhere else and give somebody else the opportunity to be here. And they kind of got it worked out, but that was kind of the downside of the live stuff.
Yeah.
And so, but what was funny, back when we were doing the Penda stuff, I was in Moline, Illinois, Saturday night, and the guy goes, "I just watched you race today in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. How did you get here so quick?" And I go, "Oh, well, we have two trucks,
Yeah.
you know, and
No
so
logbooks.
no, like, yeah. So anyway, I know I'm getting off track on a lot
No,
of
you're
this stuff
good.
because it just kind of rolls into one to another.
Well, I think that's so true of the sport because I mean, one story opens up a path to four more because nothing's particularly cut and dry, I don't feel like, on this stuff. Frank and I have an episode that we're kind of collecting notes and stuff for about track aesthetics and track design and stuff like that. And I always thought USA tracks could be pretty interesting sometimes. You think back to the old days, and I mean, there was a lot of wrecked hay bales everywhere that didn't look very pleasing to the eye, but certainly by the time you guys were doing TV shows, they had modernized the appearance of their tracks a little bit more to be a little bit more in line with US Hot Rod. But Frank, I want to get your opinion on this and then I want to get Dan's. But one thing that I thought was always cool about USA is, if they ran Chicago style, then that's the same as what everybody does. But they did a lot of shows with maybe what US Hot Rod would call a St. Louis style track where you make a full lap. But USA would have the trucks turn the same direction around the course. Everybody would make left-hand turns instead of one truck, turning away. They'd be turning away from each other. One's got lefts, one's got rights. Personally, as a driver, I would have loved the balance that brought the fairness to the track. So that way there wasn't really like, different turns for different lanes. It was all pretty fair and even. What do you think on that, Frank? Have you ever gotten to run a show where they actually did build, symmetrical racing courses?
I've done it a couple times, and it makes it so much easier because you can look out the left side of the truck, which is wide open, right? So if you have to make that right turn, you're looking through the Ron Francis box and all the wiring and everything over there. So obviously, I mean, I remember the USA days were outstanding, and Christmas trees made their appearance
Yes.
a lot of times in the USA, and some of the early US hot rod stuff I did driving for Randy Brown in the early 2000s. I remember you do those first couple weekends in January. Somebody locally was trying to offload Christmas trees, and man, when the Monster Truck Show came to town, they made out like a bandit.
I love it. Dan, what was it like for you? I mean, I guess if the environment wasn't hyper competitive, did it really matter, or did you like it one way or the other? Did you appreciate when everybody had the fairness of the same turn directions? Because on camera, it looks badass to see two trucks flipping the same kind of turn.
Well, the thing is, they didn't care about the competition, but we did.
Hmm.
Because when we did the TNN stuff, we had Eric Meager, Eric Tack, Dan Runte, and we competed amongst ourselves. Okay, so they may not have cared, but we cared a lot.
Hmm.
Okay, and like I say, Jim Harbaugh was part of the thing. He was very competitive. The dirt guys, the track guys were great. Everybody made an effort, okay, and like you say, and everybody was kind of constructive. You didn't. It wasn't like other promoters will go, this is what you're going on, and we're not changing it. And so I know we had in the TNN, the Friday night deal, there was more creative tracks built for those.
Well, Firestone looks like he's out front here right now. Oh, he's struggling to get to the next set of cars, though.
Firestone about a truck length in the lead, but he's still got a big mountain ahead.
Oh, man.
He's in good shape. Now he's out of shape a little bit.
There you go. Stone Wilderness is going to get the win, Dream. I like it. That's madness. I like that.
Rutgers going to get. Watch Wilderness.
Good leave by Sampson, though. Got it up right there.
Dead even at this point. Still dead even.
Yeah, here you
Maybe
come.
a little bit to Wilderness.
Oh, man. Whoa, baby. Whoa, baby. I'll tell you what, Sampson.
Gene Patterson's going to run tonight. They take off, they get the green flag, and Sampson looks like he has a...
Watch him come on the inside. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to get on the inside, but he takes down a pole.
Snakebite with the lead as they cross the cars for the first time. Snakebite has a big lead, and now he's going to go across, and as they cross the middle, it's going to be Snakebite.
For Sampson, or Eric Meager can make some big noise with the Firestone Wilderness.
Patrick off to the side now. Meager way out. He's way, way back. Overran the course.
Oh, and Patrick
Patrick's
went
lost.
right into the cone.
Did knock it over.
And
Hey, we
Were
got
you
him
there?
back. Yeah, you locked up on us while you just
It's
started
like
talking
me
about
being
it.
on the phone and somebody hung up, but I'm still going, huh?
Well, we could hear you were trying to talk. It just was all broke up on our end. You were, but now that we got you back, we'll cut all that out. That's why we pre-record, because we suck at this. We screw shit up all the time. So don't worry, we pre-record for a reason. But no, you're kind of saying there on those Saturday night or Friday night events where it was live for USA, they did more creative tracks with like shipping containers, turned into hills and things like that. But I'll tell you what, USA was not afraid to make you guys turn those trucks around on a dime, man. Like there was not a lot of sweeping high speed turns at USA shows. It doesn't seem like.
No. So I got to tell you this story because it stuck in my head after we were talking about the RCA Dome. So Tim Hall and I are standing along the wall before the show, and we can't do anything. We can't start motors up. We can't do anything, and nobody's on the floor. And it's just Tim. It's just Tim and I, and the place is pretty full. And people doesn't realize Tim has a pretty good sense of humor.
Oh yeah.
So he looks at me, and he goes, "Of everybody in this building, you know what they're all thinking at this time?" And I said, "Tim, I have no idea." He goes, "I wonder what it would take to get to the level cool of those two guys down on the track."
Yes.
Go, "You're probably right. That's exactly probably what they're thinking."
That warms my heart, man, because so many people don't know how good Tim's dry sense of humor is, and man, I can hear him saying that.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one he did. I went to the Columbus, Ohio, at the Jamboree and the Penda race, and Tim and Mark were there, and that was when we had the open competition stuff and to qualify, and you qualified for the weekend. And Mark would make a run and he would beat me. I would go out and make a run, then I would get back in. It was just back and forth. And I never met David Morse before. He was on the other side of me. And, Tim with his temper sometimes, how he gets he gets amped up.
Just a little.
And at the end, I ended up getting in the show, and they did not. Tim goes, if we were the only ones here, we still couldn't qualify. And I remember Dave Morris looking at me and going like he couldn't believe it. And that was before Tim and I we worked a lot together, and I consider Tim one of my closest and dearest friends in this industry and stuff. And I am the same way. You get caught up in the moment, you know.
Tim has told me some wonderful stories over the years, especially obviously working there 5 years and all the time I rode down the road with Tim, or co-driving somewhere. You guys really formed a clique during the USA days. I mean, you, Tim and Mark, David Morris, some of the Bigfoot guys like you mentioned, Meager and Tack and Runty. I mean, you guys had a pretty good group of chums, and yeah, you could be competitive, but at the same time,
There was never that animosity amongst the group.
yeah. No, and some of the stories are hilarious. So, like, I want to get your take on a couple of these that Tim has told me, and I'll see if I can jog your memory on them. But one of them was Tim rolling over on live TV in Memphis. And if I recall his story, well, he had been told by somebody, it might have been you, it might have been Mark, but somebody said, whatever you do, this is live TV. Don't go over and go roll the truck over, which promptly the truck gets rolled over on live TV. Were you at that particular event? Do you recall?
Was it there or was it Des Moines, Iowa?
Oh, you know what? It might have been Des Moines. Yeah, I think you're
I
right.
remember
Yeah.
it was so cold. It was like 12 degrees below zero outside, and they'd have the door open because it was so cold. And you could see the snow blowing across the street from the track, and the steam's coming off the track. And I remember Tim did something, he hit it, and it just rolled over really slow and stuff. And, Tim's, trying to make a thing. And I remember we left that event and we went to Tacoma, Washington the following weekend, and we drove out. Tim and I and Deal Wilson went, and we were at a truck stop. It was so cold, and Tim says, "It's cold. It's colder than 10 something Indians." And I go like, "How cold could possibly 10 something Indians be?" He goes, "Can you picture 8?" And two more than that.
Two more than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was another instance, and Mark told me this story, and I love it because Mark and Tim can laugh about this stuff. Even like you said, you get caught up in the heat of the moment. But Tim told me a story, and again, I don't know if you were at this gig. I hope you were, but they were in Peoria for USA Indoors, so not too far from. It was either Peoria or Springfield, but either way, not far from Champaign. And Mark had just won, I guess, Driver of the Year the very first time in like '96 in execution.
Springfield, Illinois.
Yeah, and Mark rolls her over doing something silly or just trying to whip a donut. And I guess Tim was so mad he went over and pulled a Sharpie out of his shirt pocket before they'd even uprighted the truck and circled and crossed out the Driver of the Year sticker on the cab.
He did. He did. Yeah. He had a kind of an out of body experience that night. And his dad, Jack, bless his heart, was there. And so I said to Jack, I said, you need to help Tim get through this. He goes, he'll listen to you before he listens to me. And so yeah, I'm not going to say I've never thrown a fit at an event, but that's the sad part is a lot of people think that's just Tim in a nutshell, but it is not. It is absolutely. He is so passionate about the sport. And as you well know, the man is full of knowledge from every sport. He reads National Dragster, he reads Speed Sport, he reads everything. And I mean, he's very underrated as far as I think what people's perception of him.
I would completely agree with you on that, and I love that we got off on this topic a little because he's one of the funniest son of a guns that I ever had, the pleasure or sometimes the terror of working for or working around. I mean, as you could imagine, to a 18-year-old greenhorn like me, he could be a pretty intimidating cat sometimes when, I mean, I've seen the man lob an Odyssey battery that failed at a show. an inordinate distance that a human being shouldn't be able to lob an Odyssey battery, and then at dinner that night he'll be joking about it. He'll just be cracking
Well,
jokes.
Mark used to make a comment. He says, "You always back in the day, you always wanted to check the trash can before you dump the trash out because Tim's phone was usually in it."
Yes.
But one of the times we were in Little Rock, Arkansas. This is back in the early days of cell phones, and we were at a KFC eating lunch. And Mark, Dale Mitchell, and Andy and those guys from Memphis. And Tim's on the phone. He goes, "Ma'am, the last time I checked, Memphis was in the continental United States." So he was having problems with his phone.
Oh man. He's such an
So-
educated guy, so
Oh,
his
he's
humor is
very,
so
very
cutting.
educated. Very educated.
Like
And
he's never the guy that's gonna cuss somebody out on customer service and be like, "You suck," and hang up. Like you said, he's gonna have some kind of really witty, cutting remark the other person probably doesn't even appreciate.
he and I went to a television store we were in California, Indio, California, there all week. And I had, as my first transporter, the high tech one, and I wanted to upgrade the television in it. So we went to a audio place or whatever. And he had that old Blazer, that old red and black Blazer that
Yeah.
old beat up old junker, he hauled with him and stuff. And so we bought this like 36 or 30-inch TV or whatever. And we went out to put it in there and you couldn't put it, the back hatch wouldn't open. So we put it on top the Blazer and took a rope and roped it on there. And so as we was going back to the fairgrounds, he made a wrong turn and he turned it into this gated community.
Oh no.
And he gets up to the guard shack. And I go, I think we made a wrong turn here. he turns to go out, and the guy he says, I wonder if that guy thought we were stealing the TV. And I said, I bet he's already made the call. So
I was afraid you were going to tell me it got cleaned off the roof by a low hanging object.
no, that's something my brother did. But no, just things like that, and the thing is, back in those days, we traveled a lot, USA days and US Hot Rod days. We travel a lot cross country and stuff. One weekend we might be in Portland, Maine, and next weekend we'd be in Reno.
Hmm.
And so we travel a lot together, a bunch of us. And so that's where that's where your friendships were created.
Certainly. The kind of guys that will pull over their rigs to help you with yours when your stuff breaks down instead of roll on without you.
Tim and I was on our way to California one time, and a tornado was going through Amarillo.
Oh,
And he
boy.
goes, "What do we do?" And I said, "Keep going." I said, "I watched Twister 3 times. We got to keep moving." And because we had stopped at the Union 76 truck stop there in Amarillo, and all the windows were taped up. I mean, it was a really surreal deal. And he says, "Well, what do we do?" And I said, "I'm not standing around here. I'm going to take my chances." And I said, and so we headed west, and sure enough, Amarillo they didn't get hit real hard, but they did get hit not too long after we left.
Yeah, better stay on the move as long as you ain't driving right at it, I think. So, well, you mentioned Reno, and that brings me to one of my final points on USA I want to talk about. But on the Samson 4x4 YouTube channel, I believe it is, part of your team has uploaded some different videos from over time. And one of the very last USA shows was Reno, Nevada in, I guess it would have been, 1998. And you and Eric Tack both gave pretty moving, farewell speeches to USA kind of on the mic at the end of the night. And I thought that was really impressive for you guys to come out and really acknowledge something that you had been a part of for over a decade at that point. And I guess my question for you is, do you kind of remember that event specifically or giving that speech, but also just your sentiments in general when you guys found out that US Hot Rod was going to absorb USA at that point?
Well, that was all back when SFX basically had bought or were buying Pace and stuff like that, and we all fell into when SFX wanted to buy, they didn't know anything about monster trucks. They just was looking at the books at Pace and looking at the books oh gosh, what was there was contemporary artist or contemporary promotions or whatever in St. Louis, and they saw this motorsports side of it. And then that's when, they said, well, if you can get all these bought up, that'll make the package so much better. And so that's why that all kind of formed. And when we talked to the people at USA, he says, man, we don't want you to do this. And they go, Dan, it's a no-brainer. He says, we're worth about 3 million and they're offering us 10. It's just the way things are now. They give you, it's kind of like the fertilizer companies and stuff around here, the private ones, they're giving them so much more money they could ever make themselves and, to monopolize things. So, yeah, I would, at that thing, it was really hard for us, all of us, because they treated us so well and it was just such a good group.
Now, Dan Patrick asked me to hold you here for a minute while everybody just stay where you are. Like I say, what you just saw was history. The last race for the USA Motor Spectacular Series. I'm going to turn a microphone on and give it to Dan Patrick. I think you had something you wanted to say.
Everybody in the stands for coming, because this is very important to a lot of us. I started out 10 years ago. These guys gave me my shot. So Steve Wood and Kevin Pugh, we want to personally thank them. At least I do, and the other drivers, because we work with a lot of promoters throughout the country and the world. And these guys are far the best there ever is and probably ever will be. Dan pretty much said it all, but like I said, it's great to work with these guys. I've been with Bigfoot for 6 years. I've worked with these guys for 6 years. And actually, when I did my first show, Kevin Pugh did his 200th show. Just kind of memorial. But, hey, work here. There's a lot of great people with United Sports that we love to work with. And we just thank everybody for everything. And thanks for coming out.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Pugh. Kevin, can you step forward over in the corner? Come on, step out. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kevin Pugh, the operations director for USA Motorsports.
The realization didn't really come out there. It came out later when all of us showed up at US Hot Rod honored all of the commitments that USA made to us. So when we went to Las Vegas, because Las Vegas was kind of our last show for the winter, or close to it at Sam Boyd. When we get there and there's US Hot Rod stickers on the doors and all that, so then that was when the realization that when it was over and stuff. But Reno was always a fun show to do, and there was a good group of trucks there at the time, and I hated for that to kind of be the last show, but that's kind of after that is when US Hot Rod basically took over, and Steve Wood stayed for a little bit. Kevin stayed for a little bit, but I always say, well, there's not going to be any changes. There's always change.
Right.
And so, yeah, that was at the time, that was a great competition because they both kind of competed with each other. And I never did anything with TNT. I know the people at TNT, was good friends with Billy Joe Miles and that group from the old pulling days when I used to pull tractors at the Louisville at the Farm Machinery Show when they ran that. Yeah, that was a tough one to swallow. But I rolled right into television when I rolled into the US Hot Rod stuff. I was on the TNT series with them and all that. I was an A-list truck and until I wouldn't sign the licensing package, then because I wouldn't sign the licensing package, I went from A-list to Walmart grand openings.
Well, it seems to me like the USA thing was almost like a small town family business, and they came in and got, scooped up, bought out, pushed out of the way by like a big corporation. And I know that's a bit of a generalization. I'm painting with a little bit of a wide brush, but rather than painting that negatively towards US Hot Rod, that's not so much what I'm doing. I'm just trying to say the family feel that everyone that ran for USA conveys to us is universal among the people that ran for them. But what Dave Bennett did kind of portray for us a little bit was the same thing you said, to where the owners of USA, this was just transactional. There wasn't, they
There was
hired,
three separate. There were three separate owners.
correct, right? You had Zuckerman and Shankman, and then Russ Klein, I think, was kind of the big three
Well,
names, right?
now the
Fritz,
Chris Fritz
yep,
was, and then Russ Klein were out of Kansas City, and the other family were out of St. Louis.
yeah. But it seems like it was kind of transactional. I mean, Russ maybe had the most at heart interest in what was going on with USA, but like you said, the numbers talked, and they hired a lot of really good, passionate people to work their events, run their events, work for them. But
That was the way with Pace Management. C. Altman and all of the folks that owned Pace Management. They were great to work with and stuff. Didn't work with them a lot. Most of the stuff came out of Chicago. It was, I mean, they're all great to work with within their confines. The thing is, when I put it in perspective, of all of them, TNT was probably your best when it came to all around pulling. USA was the best when it came to mud racing, and then I want to put USA and all three of them together as far as the promotion of monster trucks. Um, the thing is, the um, TNT was more about competition.
mhm,
And USA, like I say, they weren't that keen on it as far as in the monster parts. They were as far as the mud. And then um, US Hot Rod, I mean, was more political.
yeah, certainly a bigger entity, that's for sure. I mean, a lot more going on, and obviously a very elite level of competition, since day one,
Well, hats
basically.
off. I mean, Charlie Mancuso, you can love or hate the guy or whatever. Yeah, he had a pretty harsh temper and stuff, and he was very vocal on things. But he really elevated them and got them to where they were when they sold to the Feld family.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt there. I mean, they've operated at the most elite levels of the sport for, pretty much their whole existence, and they've, continued to find ways to do that. But I tell you what, man, your insight and your anecdotal stories and stuff on the USA days are priceless to us, man. I mean, we're trying. We're not organized enough to be putting anything official together about USA, but it just seemed like it was a really cool topic that we feel like hasn't maybe been touched on enough with other people's interviews and stuff, is just really getting down to, kind of what it was like being in the trenches at the USA shows, and just how they treated you as a business, but also just as kind of a partner in their events. And it seems like you have some pretty darn, good memories of that time.
Well, the thing that I have to in all aspects, my journey to where I don't know what my legacy is going to be. It's kind of like people like me, people don't like me. I get that. I cannot be the fun, happy guy all the time. But the thing is, you get through life on the people you meet through your life, and a lot of that, your success is because of those people. And Steve Wood um, would probably be. I mean, if I go all the way back to the beginning, Bob George was a guy that was very pro Dan Patrick. Um, he gave me so many opportunities, and Steve Wood was the same way with things. He was there for me for a lot of things, and and opened the doors for a lot of things. And a lot of people at US Hot Rods the same way. I mean, we do, I make a lot of parts for them, and it's been a great relationship and all that. Um, I'm not bitter about not running there with the trucks and stuff, because that's not us. That's not what I want to do. And so I mean, like I say, you know, my relationship with, the Chandlers and the Bigfoot organization, it's just all that. Um, you know, and the friendships. I mean, just everything, just everything that's part of it. And so again, you know, people that stand there and think it was all about them, it isn't. It's about the group and the industry.
Well, and I think that kind of ties us together at the end here pretty well, as I feel like, however, the on-track product might be different or seem different, it does feel like there's a bit of that communal family, do it for the good of the show ethos now at these Hot Wheels shows that you guys kind of had at the USA days. It's so many other things are different, but I feel like the spirit of that, where, it's really just about taking care of the people in the stands that are paying your paycheck, is still the number one priority.
I couldn't agree more, and I kind of related. Obviously, I got started way later than Dan did in, as far as driving monster trucks and being involved in monster trucks. But what we're doing now almost takes me back to a 2006, 5, 4 kind of Thunder National feel, where everybody works together and it's all for the good of the show. And that's what I feel every week as far as the Hot Wheels tour, But obviously, the trucks have advanced, especially due to Dan. I mean, like I said, we're running Patrick chassis. The Holman's running Patrick chassis, and the Bigfoot trucks, they have acquired Patrick chassis moving forward. So I can't thank Dan enough for his advancement, as far as moving the trucks forward and the continued development of monster trucks, which for what we're doing at Hot Wheels, these trucks are perfect for what we're doing there. So, it's just one of those things where, like Dan said, it's a family atmosphere at Hot Wheels, and everybody works together, and I couldn't be more excited to be a part of it.
Frank, you'll appreciate this reference, being an open wheel guy like me, but I look at Dan as he's our Adrian Newey, but he's also our Delara. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
but between the advancements in safety and technology, and also just advancing the ability to service customers. I mean, if somebody handed me 500 grand right now and said, you need to get a monster truck operation up and running right now, I'm thankful I have his phone number, and he would hopefully pick up when I call, because that's who I'm calling. But as we start to finish up here, Frank, remind me, when you took your MTRA driver's test, was Dan a part of signing off on your license back in the day?
Dan was not.
Okay.
It was in Indy at the fairgrounds. The Hall brothers were there. I'm trying to remember who else. I still have the card with everyone that signed off on it, and I'll have to pull that out and show that in a future episode. But no, just like you're saying though, Dan, he is the Delara of monster trucks. And if you need a part, you need a piece. I know I text Rick all the time, and I've called Dan here in the last month or so about stuff, and we just got a jack from him. So Dan is the guy if you need anything. Just like you said, Kyle, if I fell into a bunch of money and wanted to just start my own monster truck operation, the first call I'm making is Dan Patrick, which he may not like that because he may not want to build me 2 trucks, but still, the call would go there. At least it would go
Yeah.
there.
Well,
I only say this twice or a couple times a year when I'm finishing up a turnkey or finish up a turnkey truck. This is the last damn one of these I'm putting together.
note to everybody out there that wants a Patrick turnkey truck, get your order in before he decides this really is the last
No
one. You got to
more.
get it while you can. We don't
No
know what
more.
the final serial number is going to be, but you should get your orders in. Well, Dan, I'm going to leave us on one of my favorite memories of you from my time selfishly getting to work with you, and certainly worked around you in different capacities, as a crew guy at Hall Brothers, a driver at Foot. But honestly, my favorite and most proudest memory of you, in any capacity, and this one, it's a heavy subject to some extent, but I also think it's a triumph for you. And it's when I took over announcing Monster Nationals after Geo passed, and then we brought you back. I think it was Highland Heights, or not Highland Heights, what the arena outside of Chicago. Highland Heights was Kentucky, but
Hoffman Estates.
Hoffman Estates. There we go. And we brought you back on the tour and got you back on the saddle and announcing you into the show, after we did our tribute to George on the screen. And of course, we're not talking to the crowd about anything that we know as business, monster trucks, whatever. We're just introducing Dan Patrick and Samson. But I'm telling you right now, I have never had to hold back, such emotion as what I felt that first Friday night announcing you in as, Dan Patrick, legendary driver of the Samson monster truck. I couldn't have been more fucking proud, dude. And then to finish out the tour with you, we did Champaign, we did Erie, we did Columbus, we did a lot of shows together, and I got to see you from a whole different side of things. Allison and I got to become friends. I got to know Chris better. You guys welcomed, me into your circle some as well, but seeing you come back out on the floor with those big arms and that big Hemi motor, man, that's my Dan Patrick memory at the top of my shelf. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. That was a tough time. And, and the thing about it is, if you're in motorsports for as long as I've been in, there's going to be times like that. You don't want to be the one involved in that, but, there's just going to be that. And I know when I came back, and I was thinking the first show was when I came back from after that incident and stuff was I think in Youngstown.
Was it? Okay.
I was Youngstown, and Eric Tack came, and of course Gene was there, and and I'm not going to lie to you. When I was sitting in there getting ready to start the show, I wanted to be anywhere but there. I just did not want to be there,
Mm-hmm.
and if it wasn't, and Gene kind of realized that, and he kind of come in the cab, and he helped me through a little bit there, and once I got out and got going and stuff, then it all made sense that that's what I needed to do, and all that. So it's like I said earlier, it's the relationships you create through the journey that in life and all the people, whether it's motorsports or not motorsports related, that help you to get through that challenge.
That's right. Well, you, sir, have conquered certainly more challenges than just about anybody we can think of, and not just this sport, but motorsports in general. And now we get to help you finish probably one of your most recent difficult challenges, and that's putting up with Frank and I for 2 hours
Well,
on a Zoom call.
That's fine. I always enjoyed when Frank and I did some of the Chris Arell shows and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah.
And then between him and Chris and stuff, we always had a good time.
Maybe
We
we'll do,
did.
Frank, maybe we'll do like a holiday special BDC at the end of the year, and we'll talk nothing but shows in French Canada, and we'll have Dan back on for that.
Now, Kyle, you mentioned one of your favorite memories about Dan. I have a ton of memories that I can think of about
Let's
Dan
get it.
Patrick.
Yeah.
But I will say one of the highlights of my career, maybe it's top two or three, is I don't say I drove Samson. I tell people I got to drive Samson. That's what I say. People ask me all the time, you've driven all these trucks. What was one of your favorites? I go, definitely getting the opportunity to drive Samson. I never say, I drove Samson. I say I got to drive it, which is there's a very short list of guys that got to drive Samson.
That particular truck was not the easiest for somebody to step in and drive, because it had a slipper clutch in it and a 4-speed Lenco. And I remember telling Frank, he's asking these questions, and we didn't tell Chris Arell he was driving until we got there.
Mhm.
And so I remember in the racing part of it, I told Frank, I said, okay, now when you leave, you hit the throttle. He says, the shift light there, I says, each time that thing flashes, you just hit that button. You want me to wait down to get down to the end of the turn before I go into high gear? No, you just follow that light. And then he did it. And after it was over, I said, "You all right?" He says, "That light flashed. I mean, I was in high gear before I moved 20 feet." And I go, yeah.
Yep.
And so anyway, I says, "How zippy was it?" He goes, "Oh my," you know. So there, it's pretty zippy.
There's not
Oh,
many
yeah.
monster trucks apart from Raminator and Bigfoot that I could genuinely say I wish I could have had the opportunity to drive. But I think Samson of that era would have felt really, really enjoyable to me, especially coming up driving haul trucks when they still had Lenkos and Crower glides and stuff. Like there was a whole clique of you guys, and that's probably for our Penda and Pro MT episode to get into the nuts and bolts of. But there was the old slipper clutch bandits with you guys and Hall Brothers and David
Well,
Morse and Deal
back in the
Wilson.
day, the automatics weren't stout enough then.
Yeah.
And, we used to carry 4 automatic transmissions just to get through a weekend,
Mm.
and when the Penda series and all that. And, it was funny is back then, a 4-speed Lenco transmission was like $6,000 when a high end, turbo 400 was $1,100.
Mm.
And, I went to the bank and borrowed money to do that. Now I got $13,000 power glides,
Yeah.
and so you never think you're going to spend that kind of money to do that. And, that was just the way the generations, at the time, because, Fred Schaefer, all his trucks had Lenkos in them, slipper clutches, and I could never sell that. Well, I take that back. When we built Bigfoot 9, I put a slipper clutch in it and a 2-speed Lenco, and Andy or Gene and them didn't have any problems, but Kramer, he had a lot of he fought that.
Yeah.
And so and the automatics did leave harder than the the slipper clutches did on a short track, but not on
Yeah.
the long deal. But anyway, that's a whole different
Oh, yeah.
subject.
We're going to talk Lenkos one night. I guarantee you we got to. That's such an interesting topic. But well, Dan, Frank and I both, we can't thank you enough for joining us tonight. I hope you had a good time kind of strolling down, some different parts of the many memory lanes that you've occupied. But you know what? We can't wait to get this out. I'll get in touch with you hopefully for some extra photos or things that we can illustrate this with. But really, we just value your time and your stories more than anything, sir. It's been an honor having you on.
Yep.
Possibly the worst monster truck talk show ever, but we'll hold on to that throne.
Well, then I'm the perfect guy for that.
There we go.
When you're looking for that. But no, I enjoy it, and I enjoy the conversations and stuff, and enjoy that. Problem is, my story is there. It's like, Leslie Mears says she always likes story time with Dan. So.
I describe talking to folks like yourself as panning for gold. You know what I mean? Like it's just so exciting because you never know what kind of story's going to roll through or something like that. But in any event, we like I said, we appreciate you having on. So we'll sign off for tonight. This is of course the Bottom Dead Center show exclusively on the Old School Monster Trucks YouTube channel. On behalf of our guests Dan Patrick, Frank Krimmel, and myself, Kyle Doyle, appreciate you guys tuning in as always, and keep your eye out. You never know what we're going to drop next on the OSMT YouTube channel.